Today is June 27th, 1985. This is Joe, Todd, and Harry Stegeman, an interview with Mr. Willis Peyton in Enid, Oklahoma. So, where were you born?
Neosha Falls, Kansas,
And when's your birthday?
January the 5th.
What year?
When I was born, 1896,
1896. Who was your father?
Jackson Peyton,
And your mother?
Elizabeth Peyton,
What was her maiden name?
Spurgeon,
Spurgeon. Were they both from Kansas?
yes,
Mm-hmm. What type of work did your father do?
farmer.
Farmer. Did he homestead in Kansas?
No, he didn't homestead, but he bought the land. The government offered this land. It was a different way they did in those days. They'd offered land at, say, $3 an acre to get people to come in there and settle, you know. Well, that's the way he got his farm, was about $3 an acre.
Yeah. When did your family move to Kansas? Any idea?
Well, it was in the, well, me being born in 96, it had to be, at least 10 or 15 years before that they came there. When it was one of them openings there, I don't remember that.
Where did they come from?
My father is from Ohio, and my mother is from the state of West Virginia.
Did you know your grandparents?
On the Spurgeon side of the family I did, but not the other.
Were either of your grandfathers in the Civil War?
No, they were not in the Civil War, but they were present in the war. They were in civil service.
Ever hear any stories of what they were doing during the war?
Yes, sir. They were in those days, you know, what we call anything with motorized. Everything was pulled with horses and mules in those days, and they hauled supplies for the Confederate Army. They hauled.
Where were they living at that time? Wheeling, West Virginia. Mm-hmm.
Wheeling, yes.
And they worked for the Confederacy then?
Yes, they were in the what we'd call civil service, and this they like postal workers, or kind of like this contract operator out at the base. He's not the government. He's private, and that's the way they were. They were private haulers, but under civil service.
Yeah, what were their names? Your grandparents, your grandfather's names.
Spurgeon.
What was his first name?
Oh, I can't tell you that. My memory don't.
Okay. As a small boy, what chores did you do in the farm?
Oh, my land, I had a lot of them. I carried wood and kindling and carried out the ashes and just very minor things, because I was pretty small.
Mm-hmm. What were the major crops you raised in the farm?
Wheat and corn was in Kansas was the main crops.
Remember wheat harvest up in Kansas?
Yes, as a small boy, when they used to cut wheat with a binder.
Yeah. Tell me about that wheat harvest.
Well, the harvest in those days, when they would cut the wheat, they cut it with a binder, of course, and it bound the wheat in bundles, and then they shocked them, and they had to leave them in the shock for possibly 30 days, and they went through what they call a sweat. They went through a sweat, and then after they got through that, that's to eliminate moisture that you read about now in today's. That was to eliminate the moisture, and the wheat was absolutely dry and ready. And so after about 30 days, the thrashing machine would come in and thrash the wheat, and then they would store it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no elevators like they got now. They had to have storage for it on the farm.
How do you shock wheat?
Well, the binder makes bundles out of it and ties a cord around it and knots it, and then kicks it out. Well, men follow along behind the binder, and they take the shocks and they set up two, and then they'll set up two more on that side and just build up all around it. And there's never more than, I wouldn't think there's ever more than 7 or 8 bundles in one shot.
Mm-hmm.
How do you
Keep the shocks dry when it rains.
You don't keep them dry. They'll turn the water.
They will.
They'll turn the water.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is this stacked in a certain way so it will?
Well, they just make a little, just like that. They just stack them so they'll slope back down like that.
And they come.
The heads all come up at the top.
Mm-hmm.
That way, and the water hits the head. It never stay on the heads, and it just goes off, and the stalks of the wheat just knock the water off.
Yeah. Okay.
How long did you live in Kansas?
7 years. I left there when I was 7 years old
And you came to Oklahoma?
in 1903.
How'd you travel?
We came on the Santa Fe Railroad out of the Ocean Falls, and then connected with the Frisco at Cherryvale, and then came right on into Oklahoma, and we went to Chandler, Oklahoma. Was the first place we stopped at, where I had an uncle that lived.
How big was Chandler at that time?
Oh, approximately 1,000 people.
Were they still recovering from that tornado? And
Well, I'll tell you one thing. They were, every time that a black cloud coming up, they was all standing on outside of their houses watching it just like prairie dogs in a prairie dog hole.
ever hearing any stories about that tornado?
Yeah, oh yes, my uncle told us about it. It just about wiped the town out.
What stories did he tell you about that?
Well, it just, there wasn't much to tell other than it just come in there and cut a swath through the town and just about took the town. That was all there was to it.
How many people were killed in that?
I can't tell you that.
Yeah. So I guess it really wiped the town out then, didn't it?
Oh yes, and people had. Luckily, there wasn't too much death because they got covered somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Of course, I guess that time they really didn't have the warning system we have today.
No. And most people had caves, in those days that they stored their potatoes and their fruit and stuff in,
Mm-hmm. How long did you live in Chandler?
Oh, just a very short while. We just stopped there. My uncle was the main one that wanted us to come to Oklahoma. My father was sick, and he had to leave Kansas on account of his health, and he come down here, and he thought he would go back to farming again, but he never was able to. He got worse down here, had asthma.
Mm-hmm. From Chandler, what did you move?
Here to Enid.
Okay, and still 1904?
Oh, long about that.
Yeah. When you came to Enid, you ever meet Frank France?
Frank France?
Yeah.
No, but I knew about all the France people.
Mm-hmm.
I was personally acquainted with Douglas France, one of the younger ones that was about my age. He was a World War I veteran, and I knew him, but everybody knew the France people because they were in a lot of different businesses.
Mm-hmm. Was there a big celebration here when he was appointed governor?
I don't know how big it was. There was one, but I don't know how big.
Yeah. Did you attend it?
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah.
Because I was small and real small.
Mm-hmm.
He was a territorial governor,
Right. Statehood Day.
1907.
1907, on the 16th of November, I believe.
Right. What was that day like?
Well, it was just an ordinary winter day, as far as my memory tells me.
Was there a celebration again on that day here?
I don't know if there wasn't any followed that. Wasn't any followed that I know of.
Of course, someone said it was a damper because France wasn't elected governor.
Yeah, well, that's could have been it.
Okay. Did your father continue to farm?
No, he was never able to go to farming. He didn't live long after we got to Oklahoma, and we went. My folks lived in Hennessy and Kingfisher for a short length of time, and of course Enid was always home base. And we'd come back here, That is due to the fact that we had my brother and a brother-in-law that was worked for the Rock Island. And after Father died, why, that left Mother with us kids, and we just all, we lived with the relatives. And that's why I had to went to Kingfisher and Hennessy. I had a sister in both places.
Did you ever
Live together as a family again after that?
No, we never did after the father died, because even my mother, we had to get out and go to work. And we didn't stay down there long. We come up here because you had to go where there was work.
Mm-hmm. What type of work were you doing then in those years?
Nothing, going to school. I was just a boy.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do no work other than now. I'd sell newspapers on the streets and things like that, especially after I got up to Enid.
Mm-hmm.
I loved to eat, so I had to work and do something.
What year were you selling newspapers here in Enid?
Oh, well, let's see. Well, we'll say about 1907 and 12 along in there.
Mm-hmm. What was the name of the newspaper?
Wichita Eagle was the main one, and then the Daily Oklahoman was second. In the early days, the Wichita Eagle was a lot more popular here in Enid than the Oklahoman was, because so many Kansas people had come down here and settled when they had the opening of the Cherokee Strip, that the Wichita Eagle was the most popular paper and in some parts of our state, the Daily Oklahoman has never been popular, and it don't do good here. They can hardly get a paper route going here in Enid.
How much did the paper cost at that time?
Oh, I sold it on the street. I'd sell it for a nickel.
Mm-hmm.
I'd sell it for a nickel, and I got 3 cents of it.
Was it a daily?
Yes.
Yeah, the Wichita Eagle was daily, and then, well, here of a morning, early in the morning, I had to go down to the Rock Island Depot and meet the train in Wichita. And they brought the Wichita Eagle down, and it got here at 5:15 in the morning. And the agent for the Wichita Eagle here, he had several boys. I wasn't the only one, of course. And we have to meet him down there, and he'd all give us our papers. Some of us had routes, and others sold on the streets. And then later, the Oklahoman didn't get into Enid till 10 o'clock, coming up from El Reno. Didn't get in here till 10 o'clock, and we sold a few of them, but they didn't sell like the Wichita Eagle did.
Mm-hmm. And he sold papers in the street?
Yes, sir, I sure did.
Did you sell them on the street corner downtown?
No, I went around different places. We'd go to the hotels and restaurants, and because in those days there were a lot of traveling men, and they were the ones who would buy these papers more than anybody else. Mm-hmm. And there were worlds of traveling men in those days, and the hotels and restaurants, and then on the street, where we would sell them.
What were the hotels, the names of them at that time?
Well, the Lowen Hotel, which later became the Oxford, and then the Billings Hotel was there right off of the square on West Broadway, there where Old Tasco is, and then there was a St. Joe Hotel on South Grand, just off of the square, and then there were a lot of rooming houses in those days, because there were a lot of working men who, that's the only place they had to live. They didn't, they couldn't afford to live at the hotel, so they had a lot of rooming houses. And people uptown that worked uptown lived in the rooming houses too. It was close to their business.
What's the difference between a hotel and a rooming house? What's the difference?
Well, usually the hotels have a place to eat, and a rooming house is nothing but just a sleeping room. That's all you get, just a sleeping room.
Mm-hmm. What was the difference in price between a hotel and a rooming house?
Well, the hotels would have nightly rates. Now, I can't tell you that. Hotels would have nightly rates, and the rooming houses usually rented to their people by the week. They were rented by the week. But I can't tell you the price. I don't remember. 'Cause
Can you recall the name of the restaurants and who ran them and their location?
well, the Strickler people, the Stricklers, were one of them, and then the Greeks. There was the Hieronypus. They had restaurants, and there was a man by the name of oh shoot. Oh my land, I can't think, but they were. We had a lot of good restaurants in those days, and they really served good food to eat too. It was that kind of stuff that'd stay with you. You know, it wasn't fancy. It was good though.
How much money would you make, say, during the week on your newspaper route?
Oh, well, selling papers. Oh, I'd average making. I'd average making at least $5. That's all. You see getting 3 cents out of every paper you sold. You'd have to sell a lot of papers, you know, but money was worth more in those days.
Yeah, for $5 a week, is that pretty good money?
Pretty good for just a kid, just an ordinary little kid. Yeah.
Did you go through high school?
No, 8th grade is as far as I went.
And what year did you complete the 8th grade?
1912.
1912. After high school, what did you do?
No, I didn't go to high school.
I mean, after the 8th grade, I'm sorry, after the 8th grade.
Well, I continued. I just started working, just working at different things. I worked in a drugstore just as a cleanup boy, and then I worked at a bakery wrapping bread, and I delivered groceries. I worked as a delivery boy at Moore's Grocery on the west side of the square, and then later I worked for Weibel's Home Dairy, and then I got real ambitious, and me and another boy went up to Wichita and worked for 2 years up there at Wichita as messenger boys for the Western Union. And I also, for about 3 hours in the evening, I operated an elevator in the Beacon Building at Wichita. And then, and every move I'd make, like anybody else, whatever move I made, I always went where I could make a little more money. That's why I moved. And so then in 1915, I went to work for the Frisco Railroad.
What was your first job at the railroad?
Night baggageman.
And what did your duties consist of?
That consisted of a lot of things. I not only handling the baggage for 3 night trains, I worked over in the freight office on doing several different all kind of work, anything that they wanted me to do in those days. And on that first job that I had, I worked 12 hours a day. And then I, of course, from that time on, I worked on a lot of different clerical jobs, and I was there for 46 years. And I was cashier and paymaster on the last several years that I worked, or last 30 years that I worked.
How did World War I affect the railroads?
Well, they done well, but their commodity that they transported was all just changed around from war supplies, from civilian supplies to war supplies and things, and then during the war, then World War I was in service for 2 years, and I wasn't there, but I know how they operated, because they and everybody in the country went on a wartime basis, you know, in their way of living and things like that, and you didn't get people didn't have as much, you know, for themselves, anything at all, you know. I mean, other than what they just had to give back, because they had to support the war effort, and so they didn't have no loose money to spend. A lot of people bought war bonds, and all the fancy stuff was out during the war.
Where did you take basic training?
Fort Sill and Fort Worth,
Mm-hmm.
at Camp Campbell at Fort Worth.
Mm-hmm. What was your average day in basic like?
What?
What'd you do each day?
You mean in the Army?
Yeah, like when reveille, what time would you get up?
Oh,
What would you
we'd
do?
get up there. We'd get up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning and go through all of our exercises, and then after breakfast, it wasn't a few minutes till we all fell in and either drilled or hiked, preparing for our service, you know.
Were you in the infantry?
Infantry, yes.
From Camp Bowie, where did you go?
Went overseas, went to France.
Okay, where did you depart from?
New York City.
New York City?
Mm-hmm.
Was there a big parade or big
Yeah.
celebration when you all were leaving?
Well, there was at Fort Worth,
There was.
but nothing in New York.
What was the celebration like at Fort Worth?
Oh, we the whole day was turned out to honor and have the last goodbyes. We was getting ready to go overseas, see, and that is the big parade there in Fort Worth, and the whole every department of the 36th Division was in that parade, and the people at Fort Worth, I tell you, it was a wonderful send-off.
Are you in the 36th Division?
36th.
36th.
36th, yes.
Okay.
That is made up of Oklahoma and Texas National Guard people.
Were you in the National Guard then?
Before I was in the National Guard. Well, we were mustered into the regular Army, you know, when we went down to Fort Sill.
When did you join the National Guard?
I'll tell you now. April the 3rd, 1917.
Did you join the National Guard specifically for the war? Did you know the war was
Yes,
coming?
we knew it was coming on, but they were recruiting people to fill up the full strength, see?
Mm-hmm.
And we enlisted in the old K Company right here from Enid.
Mm-hmm.
And went down there, and it wasn't long till we was mustered into the regular Army.
Anything happened on the train trip from Fort Worth to New York that you can remember?
No, other than everything went well. We just, no particular incidents, other than because from here down to Fort Sill was just a few hours, and then from when we left Fort Sill to go to Fort Worth, it was just an overnight trip. That is all there was to it, and there was nothing unusual happening.
When you were going to New York by train, did crowds meet you at the different stations?
Yes, sir. The different groups, women's organizations, and the YMCA and Red Cross people, and they set up at some places, they had canteens, you know, that they served troops going through on the train all the time. You'd get out and relax, you know, they'd stop the train and you'd relax there. This was prearranged, of course, and we'd get some light refreshments or and things like that, and just a good send-off. Everybody seemed to be just giving us their goodwill and everything.
Did you go to the canteen at El Reno?
No. We went from Fort Worth. We went straight east to Birmingham, Alabama, and then up the East Coast to New York.
From Enid to Fort Sill, did you go through El Reno on that trip?
Yeah, but we just went right on through there.
Okay. You know, that was the first canteen.
Well, it wasn't when we went. There wasn't.
Okay.
There wasn't any.
Okay, there wasn't. Okay.
See, we were among the first ones, you
Yeah,
know, before they got these things set up here in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
We got down there because there wasn't much of anything
Mm-hmm.
when we first started out.
What ship did you go overseas on?
The USS Maui, M-A-U-I.
Anything happened on the trip over?
Oh, nothing particular happened other than our ship transport that we were on. It had to travel, you know, in a zigzag course to avoid submarine detection, you know, and there was no, and it took longer. It took us 13 days to go from New York to Brest, France, and there were no incidents other than we getting our first experiences on the high seas, and some of us got sick and some didn't. Thank goodness I didn't.
How many men were on the ship?
Oh, let's see. Oh, I'd say on the ship there's at least 1,000 on there because they they had whatever the capacity was. They had, that's what it took. I couldn't tell you exactly at all, but it was sure loaded. A lot of them.
Now, was this ship? Everybody on the ship was the 36th Division on that ship.
Yes. Yeah.
Where'd you sleep?
You know, down below deck and they had bunker type beds for you. There was about 3, I think. 3, 3 high.
And what about your meals? What did they consist of?
Well, every at meal time you'd go to a well, I won't say dining room, but mess hall, I guess that you'll call it, on board ship, and you would eat, and then you returned, and you had freedom to go up on deck anytime in between times because there was nothing else to do. And there wasn't a thing to do other than just, and some of the guys felt so sick they thought the world was coming to an end, and they stayed in their bunker, and they tried to keep them from doing that. They wanted them to go up on seas, and they'd go up on deck, I mean, and then when you go up on deck, the boys look at them waves going up and down, and you're ship like a cork on the water, you know. They thought that made them sicker than ever. But I tell you, they didn't realize, you know, there's nothing better than salt air. Salt air is the most refreshing things for the body, you know. There is salt air, you know. It's just pure, you know. There's nothing, and so that's about all we done. Only we thought we'd never get there.
When did you land at Brest?
You just wait a minute, and I'll tell you exactly. But Herman, you know, transferred out of our unit and our company, and went. He was in the same division, but he transferred into the bakery company.
Yeah, I knew. He went in the bakery.
That's his name, Herman Stegeman?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I was so smart. Here's there's the ship I was on,
USS Maui.
and this is what we mail back home. That's what we mail back home when we arrived. We couldn't.
Boy, you did real good in keeping all that.
Let's see it. No, there's no dates on it, and I don't think we were allowed to put dates on anything. I don't think.
Yeah. Was it in 17 or 18 that you were?
It was in 18 we went over. It was in, well, let's say that, I'll tell you. It was in the month of July. July in 1918, but the actual date, I don't think we allowed anybody to ever
Yeah.
tell that.
What was your reaction when you reached France?
Well, we were always looking forward to being there, and so everything was so different. We landed at Brest, and that is a big natural harbor there, you know, and you go in through a kind of neck and you get inside, and then there's just seems like there's another big ocean inside. And so when we were unloaded, after we disembarked there, and we were taken temporarily to a military barracks place there to stay until we moved inland. And it was, we discovered more about, well, everything was foreign, of course, the buildings and everything. Some of them was all made of stone and brick, you know, and we just was amazed at that. And of course that was due to they don't have no timber land in France, you know. And you want to remember too that France is in mileage, it's not as big as the state of Texas. A lot of people don't ever stop to think about that. And anyhow, training again after we got over there, and so we took trains out of Brest and went inland to a training area there, and there's where we got to see more of the French than we did anywhere else, because they kept us pretty tight there for a while.
What type of training did you have there?
We had the well-known 40 and 8 boxcars, 40 men or 8 horses. You could ship either one of them the same way. But we didn't suffer because we had been trained, you know, and we were pretty rugged, and we didn't suffer. A lot of people talk about men having to travel in boxcars and things like that. That didn't bother us a bit. If we could just lay down, we was happy. But they were clean, and they had lots of straw in there, and we'd take our packs and had our blankets and bed down just as we were all right. We didn't suffer. And then we soon found out that the French trains traveled faster than ours did. The light equipment, you know, the trains are all light equipment. The cars are all light.
Also, they have narrow gauges, don't they?
Well, no, they have standard.
Oh, they do?
I imagine they have some narrow gauges, but not for passenger travel. It's a regular large gauge like ours.
Okay, and where were you headed? You know, you were...
We went to, our training area was around Eureville, France, and UHR, France, and that's where we trained before we went up to the front.
What type of training did you receive at that?
Well, we got a different brand of training.
Yeah.
We got a different brand of training, and because we had been trained before for trench warfare, and by the time we got over there, they had broken the German lines. See, they had broken the German lines, and everything was open warfare then. Well, then we were trained under French officers too, because men who had been experienced their contact with the Germans, and and it was real interesting too. It was very interesting, and so we went through that training period, and then we were shipped out of there, and we went up in the reserves, and we were only there just short length, just a few days, till we was right on headed for the front, and that.
What were your thoughts when you were heading toward the front?
Well, we were trained so rigidly that, you know, you don't ever let anybody tell you that you're not scared, but you are. You're not what I would say afraid. It's fear, see, temporary fear. But once you get baptized, you're through with the fear part of it, and you remember how you were trained and what you were trained for, and then you proceed right ahead, and you don't know from one minute to the next if you're going to be there or not, but you're trained on how to do it and to protect your own life first. Protect your life, but proceed ahead. And that's just the way it was.
Could you give a good description of the inside of a trench? What does it look like?
Well, yes. There's where we're in training.
Okay, and it looks like the trenches are zigzagged.
Yeah, they're zigzag. That's to protect you. If a shell falls in one part of it, it won't hurt anybody over in the other part, see? See, that's why they zigzag them. If a shell hits in the trench, it won't hurt nobody but there. If it is straight, it'd affect a lot of them. That's why it's zigzag.
How deep are the trenches?
Oh, let's see. Possibly 7 and 8 feet, because sometimes you had to stand up on a little parapet too to see over. I mean, to get over the fire, you know. But now, as I said, we didn't have to go through that. We trained for it, but we didn't have to fight any trench for it. All of ours was out fighting Indian style, you know. Run and hide and duck and dart, just like playing football, but you was playing it with a rough enemy. And
were the inside of the trenches, the walls they lined with anything, was just bare earth?
No, sometimes they would cut trees, and they would put them in there to reinforce them in case of rain, to keep them from collapsing, you know, falling in. And that's about all. There was nothing else. But there were a little thing. A lot of times you step up onto when you're going to fire. You get up on this little ledge along there that they cut back in, and then you got to step back down about a foot's all.
Ever go over the top?
They referred to that of a morning when over the top, that originated in the trenches, where you had to jump out of the trenches and go over what they call over the top. But after that, of a morning, along in the early morning, you in the early morning you knew that you were going to have to move out, you know, and so along about 4:30 or 5 o'clock, your artillery would open up a barrage. The artillery was behind you. They always fired over your head, and they would try to pulverize the enemy positions where you had to move forward to, you know. And the enemy done the same thing. They were the same way. Well, you had a time you had to leave. That is 0 hour, you know. You had to leave at a certain time. Move forward. Everybody moved from the whole sector for 7 or 8 miles. The division covered a whole sector that long, you know. And we moved forward, and that's just what we had to do.
The first time you were in combat, what'd you do?
Well, let's see. Our first, we went in. Well, we went in at night. That's the way we always relieved. You always had your relief at night, because everything kind of quieted down at night, you know. and you went into position at night, and the other outfit came out. And then the outfit that came out would be in your reserve for 1 or 2 days, and then they would move somebody else in there. But the ones who had came out, who had been through it, they kept them in reserve of fresh troops, behind fresh troops to help them, you know, and advise them and get around all the tricks of the Germans, you know.
Mm-hmm. Would you mind giving us just some incidents you remember about what happened in your combat days?
Well, I can remember I was I was wounded in action. I was wounded, and I remember that day in particular. We were moving through moving forward, and we had light. You know, when you're moving forward after an all night let up, the enemy retreats and sets up new positions. And when you advance, you have to run up against them because they have the advantage of you. They reestablish themselves, and they reestablish their positions, and they set up their positions in a place where they can see you coming, but when you're advancing, you can't see where they're at. And that's what you have to face. And in order of moving in on a position, you can't always go in forward in the front. They flank them. 3 groups of men will flank up on the machine gun position. This flank over here will move in. Well, that machine gunner will see him, and he'll attempt to stop him. Well, while he's attempting to stop him, these flanks over here are moving in closer. And then he'll see them, then he'll turn his gun on them, and then these will move up. See, they whiplash him, you know. So that's the way you eliminate a machine gun nest. And when you get close enough to throw hand grenades, well, they move. They take out or stay there and die.
Mm-hmm.
At the latter part of the war, they didn't stay and die like they did at the first part of the war.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the battles that you were involved in?
I can't tell you what you call their battle, but I can tell you the sectors I was in. I was in the Champagne sector and in the Meuse-Argonne.
Okay, what did you do in the Champagne sector?
Just that's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. Just move.
Did you do the same thing in the Meuse-Argonne?
Yeah. Just kept them moving because you see. Now this was in the 1st of October. You remember, we didn't know it. But you know, 30 days later, the armistice was, see?
Mm-hmm.
Well, our thing was to drive them people back. And just keep driving. The same thing every day. It was the same proposition of just driving them back. And in the latter days of the war, Germans would surrender above the hundreds. You know, over there when they were advancing in the first part of the war, before ever we got into it, they made dugouts for their people and the people in reserve to live, you know, and everything. Well, in the latter part of the war, when we were pushing the Germans back, the Germans felt that the thing was up, that they wasn't going to win. So they would go down in these dugouts, and when we had to advance up to that point and we'd open that door to check out, see if there's any in there, well, they'd come out there, 100 of them, with their hands up, camarade, see, they were surrendering. And that's just the way it was. And that's the way it was till the war ended.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't there at the front at the end. I was wounded and had to go to the hospital.
Were you in any of the gas attacks?
No gas.
Mm-hmm.
We were at that, not where we were.
And where were you wounded? What battle?
Well, I was, the Champagne sector.
Champagne sector.
Mm-hmm. I was wounded in my right foot with a shrapnel.
Mm-hmm. Where were you evacuated?
We went to the when you're wounded, the first place you go back to a first aid station. Then they take you back to a field hospital. So then you're put on a hospital train and taken to a base hospital. Well, I went through that process, and then we were taken to a base hospital, Army Hospital 41 in Paris. That's where I went. And stayed there till I come home.
Mm-hmm. You like a glass of water?
So that might help. And so that is...
How long were you in the hospital?
Well, I was in the hospital all the time, from the time I was wounded until I was discharged. Well, casualties were sent home that were able to get around good, They were sent home, and I was there in that hospital in Paris, Base Hospital 41, and then of course, when they sent us home, they sent us back on a hospital train back to Brest, France again, and that's where we come back. And the big hospital there to take care of men that were being sent back, And then we loaded on the ship there, and then we come to New York, and then we went into a big hospital, Debarkation Hospital number 5, where we went, and we stayed there in New York for 6 weeks till they kept their eye on us and we were all getting well, most of us, not all. Most of us were getting well and over our injury, and as time went along, so many was shipped out, and when I reached that point, I was shipped out to Fort Sill, and that's where I was discharged.
Mm-hmm. Anything happened on the trip back over from France to the U.S.?
No, it was very pleasant out there. It was very nice, and
was it a hospital ship?
Hospital ship, yeah. It was very nice. Had everything. There could be movies and everything else on the ship, and but we come home. Like I told you, it took us 13 days to go over, but we come back in 6.
What did you do on Armistice Day, the day the war ended?
Well, the day the war ended, I'll tell you, I didn't do very much because I was laying flat on my back in the hospital. We was there at in the hospital, and that morning now, where the armistice was signed, was just about 10 miles from where our hospital was. Mm-hmm. And when it was signed, it wasn't but a short while. The papers appeared on the streets in Paris, and of course they brought them to the hospital too. We knew it had been signed, but it wasn't effective till 11 o'clock. And everybody in there, they didn't know for sure whether it was true or false, whether the Germans would pull a trick on us or not, Nobody knew for sure. But I'll tell you, when 11 o'clock comes, in all those wards in the hospital, you could have dropped a pin. and everybody began looking at each other, and just a little after 11, and then all of a sudden just bedlam broke loose. They all started hollering and throwing books and packages of cigarettes at each other from one bed to the other. Fellows that couldn't get out of bed, whatever was loose, he'd throw it at some guy over on the other row of beds on the other side of the ward. It was quiet, and they were enthused. And then after that quieted down, then there was a kind of a quiet spell prevailed, and then another uproar came. Do you know what it was? When do we go home? When do we go home? That's all we thought about. Then after it was over with, they was ready to go home. They wasn't ready to stay there. They wanted to go home. Mm-hmm. Kind of like the hostages.
Mm-hmm. What were your feelings when you passed by the Statue of Liberty?
Well, I saw it, of course, both going and coming, and it looked awful good. I was mighty happy to see it. That's one thing about it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we saw it going and coming.
Did you receive your Purple Heart?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Sure it is.
Could you give me some reflections of what you think about the war, World War I?
Well, yes, I can tell you. And why in later years too, I have often thought about it, how unnecessary war is. We talk about people being uncivilized, you know, and the natives of Africa and places like that. Well, when we have men in the world that do things that create war, which I figure is worse than any savage ever done in his life. And until we can eliminate the people that make war, we're going to always have them. And the people who make war never fight them. That's sad but true. I don't want to get into any local things, but just to cite you an incident in the Lebanon situation, which was proved wrong. We got trigger happy, went over there and shoved a lot of Marines in there, landed a lot of Marines. Our gunboats out in the harbor. Begin to blasting the PLO people in Beirut, killing men, women, and children, and then later we found out that our people thought that they would just fall dead. That the people of Lebanon, the Arabs, would all just fall dead when we showed up there with all them big guns and all them Marines. But they found out they didn't fall dead. And we had to withdraw and come out of there and hide our face. And now that, I just bring up that one incident. That goes on, has been going on in history all the time, of strong powers and strong men and people with crooked minds that go do things like that, you know. And we ourselves as honest people, we haven't got much patriotism to support such things as that. Of our own people, we condemn anybody that kills the men and women, and then when our Navy ships go in there and bombard that place, they kill innocent people that never hurt nobody in their lives. And then that's the viciousness of things like that. And until, as I said before, until we can stop the men who make war, we're going to always have them. You know, the Bible says that we'll have wars, but we as supposed to be civilized people,
He started World War One.
Germany, Germany when they invaded Belgium. See, they invaded Belgium, and the Kaiser, you know, he and Austria, they joined together, and there was another country. That's World War One, and Germany has always wanted a way to, you know, the geographical location of Germany. They have no outlet south in Europe anywhere. They can't get out, you know. Up on the in the North Sea is about the only place they can get out to the ocean. And they wanted to go down, go south and down to the Mediterranean Sea. And the Kaiser had that great ambitions of conquering Europe, and he darn near done it. And they wanted to, and so he concocted it all. And you know, they've had compulsory military training in Germany for ages, you know, long before World War I. And the Kaiser was a war-minded person, and he set out invaded, come into Belgium, and then hit France, you know, from the north, and they were going to drive to the coast before England could hardly get on her feet, you know, to do anything. And they wanted to keep England from coming on being able to land, you know. But it didn't turn out that way for him, and but his ambitious, him being ambitious, and he had trained one of the strongest military forces in the world to do it with, too. And if you remember in World War II, you know, Hitler did conquer France, you know. Hitler, they thought he was a quack, you know, and didn't pay much attention to him, and he caught them with their pants down and conquered them. And we had to go over there and break them loose. And in here, our part in World War II, we had to make a choice. We had to fight Germany then or fight them later. And because if they had conquered Europe, then they'd try to make us walk the chalk line, you know, as far as commerce was concerned. And they would have. So that's the way that was.
What'd you do after the war?
I come back to my job on Frisco, where I worked at Frisco. I had military leave, you know. Went right back there and stayed there for 46 years.
And you said that you started out as a night baggage
Yes.
handler, and then
Over the years, I worked on 5 or 6 different clerical jobs. Of course, each one of them was better than the other one. That's why I get more money. And I spent my last 30 years as cashier in the Frisco Freight Office here in Enid. I handle the accounts, you know, and I liked accounts, and so that's why I preferred that job than any of the rest. I had a right to bid on any job I wanted to, you know, but that's the one I preferred.
flu epidemic, 1918.
What's that?
The flu epidemic.
It never bothered me any at
18
all.
or 19.
No, I was in France most of the time when that flu epidemic was on, but I never had it in my life. Never. I was around them. I've seen them die right all around me with flu, but I never had it.
How many soldiers were dying of the flu?
Oh, I can't tell you. I couldn't tell you that, but there were a lot of them did. There were a lot of them.
I understand they also had a epidemic of mumps in the military too at that time.
Well, I guess I didn't have that either.
You familiar with the soldiers that went to Russia, Vladivostok and Siberia? Have you heard about those?
Yes, there was one man I knew. I knew that what they went up there. They went up there, of course, to keep off this Bolshevist movement, at that time, which later was called communism, and that was starting in Russia, and that was to head them off, that's what that was for.
Who was that man that you knew that went up there? What was his name?
In command, you mean?
Well, you said you knew someone that was in Siberia.
Homer Peck used to be in the Oklahoma Flora Company here. He was a major in the Quartermaster Corps, and he was with Headquarters Company with the Siberian American Army.
Is he still living?
No, he's dead.
Well, the reason. How many men are still living that you were joined the army with?
Well, there's only one. There's only one that I know of that is still living, and he that's my picture. And here's the man. I had a letter from him just the other day. That man right there.
What's his name?
His name's Leo Rinkelmeyer. He's from Bison down here. Bison. His father used to run a store at Bison.
Mm-hmm. And he still lives there at Bison?
No, he's living at Fayetteville, Arkansas now. I got in contact with him. I didn't know where he was, and I got in contact through a nephew, George Malachik, is a school teacher at Walcomas, and a lot of Malachiks, down there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And his last name is Rinkelmeyer. What's his first name?
Leo J.
You don't have a picture of Herman in there, do you, anywhere?
No, but I've got one in my bedroom in there, in a big picture. The company, I'll show you.
Mm-hmm. Now you say Company K was formed here in Enid.
Yeah.
Winfield Scott.
Yeah, I remember Winfield.
Who was your commanding officer?
Well, just open that up there.
Okay, Captain Harry Richards,
Captain Harry Richards. Yes.
Lieutenant George Barnes, and Lieutenant John Conway.
Yeah. That's his.
And Willis Peyton.
Yeah. Now that is the old National Guard coming in. Then we were mustered into, that's pasted down there, but we were mustered into the regular army down at Fort Sill.
Anyone else still living beside you and Mr. Rinkelmeyer?
That's all that I know of. I imagine there is, but as I said, after the war, that fellows scattered all over. Show that to him. That
Now, Company K, it was mainly infantry, wasn't it?
all infantry, yeah, that was infantry, but there were several infantry companies from all over the state, see, and then there was artillery and medical and machine gun and.
Now, were you at Camp Donovan?
No. Now, here, Camp Donovan was at Fort Sill, see. We were there, they were building Camp Donovan when we left.
Okay.
And the 35th Division came in there and formed the Missouri and Kansas National Guard come in there and formed the 35th Division. We went to Texas and consolidated with the Texas National Guard and made the 36th Division.
Okay. Do you have any more incidents of just your Army career that you could remember?
No.
Eli Roberts.
Yeah, Eli.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was a sergeant. He learned me my first right and left face from the drill sergeant. He was when I went in. Yeah, I knew him here real well here in Enid. We visited and went to the same church together when we was.
Say anything, any other incident that you can remember?
No, other than my activities in the VFW here in Enid. I was always a member of the VFW. What's the name?
Well, Judge
And
Jeff Conway.
Jeff
I worked with him.
always, of course, active in my union, the Brotherhood of Railroad Clerks, and I don't know much of anything other than I've seen a lot of things happen here in Enid
Over a lot of years.
over a lot of years. Saw the streetcar lines come in here when they came. Saw the old courthouse first built way back there in 1907, and then it later burned down. And I saw a lot of building. The old Lawn Hotel, what later was the Oxford, I saw it built and saw it burn down. And downtown here, where the old telephone building where Waters is now, I saw it built. And there was a lot of building going on around statehood time.
Do you remember the bank panic of 1907?
No, at that age I wouldn't be thinking about bank panics. Maybe I didn't get as much money to spend then as no, I don't remember nothing about that.
Also, I understand that there was a depression after World War I, 1920, 1921.
Well, it was a kind of a depression, all right, because everything just went to hawk. That was when Hoover was president. Everything, the money manipulators, they couldn't keep things balanced, so things went downhill to.
When was that was?
Hoover was president when the depression started.
Okay, now that's a Great Depression of the 30s.
It's beginning in the late 20s.
It was late 20s when he went out, and it never did recover. See, they tried to recover it, but it wouldn't recover, and it finally when the depression hit, then it was just all gone.
How did that depression affect the railroads in the 30s?
Well, lack of business. Nobody had any money. Nobody couldn't buy nothing. The stores didn't order nothing. They didn't order it because it had rotted on their shelves, because nobody had any money. They couldn't buy it. So everything went to pot. Everything. Just everything.
How were did they have like a nurse corps in France during the war, the nurses?
Oh, they were Army nurses and Red Cross nurses.
How were they organized?
How they were what?
How were they organized, or?
They were United States Army Nursing Corps. That was the name of it, just like an Army unit. I don't like to be telling you too much about myself, but I'll show you a little something here that might be interesting. There's the daughter of the first governor of Oklahoma. She was one of our nurses.
Frances Haskell, she was.
She was one of our nurses at Base Hospital 41. Here's some letters I got. I contacted her after the war was over, in later years. And letters I had from.
Was this in France?
Here's where our hospital was. That building right there. That was a girls' music school, and during the war they converted it into a hospital. Right there, that's a picture of it there.
We have an interview with her,
Mm.
with Frances Haskell.
While she's living?
Yeah.
You did well, good. Well, well, there she was. There's one time she ran for Congress down in Texas and lost. But and she sent me that, and here's pictures of her out of the Oklahoman, and here she was when this was her name. No, she never did go by her married name, you know. She was always Frances Haskell, but that man was her husband, and there, here's where when she died.
Yeah.
I've got Grand Central Palace. That's where our hospital was in New York City. And I've got a picture of the hospital there. And here's the ship I went over on, and here's the one I come home on.
This is the hospital ship USS Agamemnon.
Yeah.
And this is the Maui.
This is the Maui, but you don't get it. It's not this one here. It's at the dock, and I got these pictures from the War Department after the war. And here's the hospital where it was in New York City. That was the Grand Central Palace. They converted it into a hospital. That was the hospital I was at in New York City.
What did you do during World War II?
What did I do? I was at the railroad in the office.
How did
My son was in World War II.
how did the Second World War affect the railroads?
Well, ours was pretty prosperous because we handled a lot of war material, and like wheat and a lot of ammunition. You know, down at McAllister, the Navy had that big ammunition place at McAllister, and then the oil companies done a thriving business because the government used a lot of oil and gasoline, you know, and we were just a hopping all the time. It was everything, and things went along. Really, they were good as far as railroading was concerned because all the war industries were working, you know, and people. They couldn't buy everything that they wanted because they quit manufacturing some things, you know, and turned it all to war supplies, you know. And like the automobile people, you know, they went to making trucks and things used in the war, you know.
Was there a big were you living here in Enid at that time?
Yes.
The war? Was there a big celebration when the war ended? World War II.
World War II? Well, yes. Now let's see. Well, there were two endings, VJ Day and then the one in
VE Day.
Yeah, and yeah, people downtown they had several get-togethers. I remember now at the convention hall and places and things like that. And everybody in the churches all had little celebrations, and everybody.
Yeah, let me back up. I was going to ask, whenever you landed on the Agamemnon in New York Harbor, was there a big celebration when?
No, there was no celebration. No, because there was a lot of them ships coming in there, and they're just our ship. We landed. Our ship came into New York Harbor on January the 4th, and we come across the Atlantic in December, and got there to harbor. We left on the 27th, I think it was, of December, and got there on the 4th, and then we unloaded the next morning to go to the hospital. And our ship coming across the Atlantic, it was just completely, looked like an iceberg coming into the harbor. All the gear on top of the ship was just coated with ice, you know. Oh, it's just ice from one end to the other. You know, in the wintertime, the Atlantic's a booger.
Ever have any thoughts about the Titanic?
yeah, I've thought about that. Yeah, you know, it's a funny thing. You know, when you go, when we traveled over there, you know, you go in several ships at a time, you know, and you're covered with you're protected with these sub-chasers, you know, and there you're watching the other ships, and you're going up and down. They're just like a cork. They go way down and look like a valley, and then that would rise, and there they'd be up here. And then you'd be doing the same thing too. You see, in the waves, the waves, you just go up and down like a cork in the water. And you'd see them ships rise up on that water over there, that were 100 yards away from you. You'd see them right way up, and then they'd sink right down and almost go right aside. But because you was going through the same thing somewhere else, see? You're just up and down, but you're always headed the same way.
No, when your ship was covered with ice coming back.
Yeah, coming home, yeah. We went over in the summertime.
What were you thinking about the Titanic at that time?
Well, I didn't think about the Titanic, but we always thought about it would be a long walk home if anything ever happened.
Mm-hmm. What was that Christmas like in France, December?
Oh, well, Christmas was at Brest. We had Thanksgiving at the hospital in Paris, and then we took the train and went there getting ready to come home, and we was at the hospital at Brest. Oh, they had that thing all decorated and everything, and they had all the trimmings. They had turkey and ham and cranberry sauce and everything imaginable. They did it all the army places.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were very happy, and we were treated good. There's just no doubt about that.
Where'd you meet your wife?
Here in Enid.
What's her name?
Her maiden name?
Yeah.
Her maiden name was Ada Foley, and when I met her, she was working in the Evans drugstore. It used to be down by the old Central National Bank when they were at the old store.
What year did you get married?
In 1919.
1919.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. How many kids you have?
Two, a boy and a girl, and in fact, our boy he's past 64 years old now, and he's retiring the 1st of July from the Phillips Petroleum Company over at Bartlesville. He's been there for almost 39 years.
What's his name?
Clement Peyton. Clem, you know it all, Clem.
That name's familiar. Well, let me see. Do you have any questions?
I can kind of remember two lines to a poem, what you were saying a while ago. I wonder if the kings who planned it all are really satisfied. They played a game of checkers and 11 million died.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
talking about World War One.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that was the Tsar of Russia, Kaiser of Germany,
Yeah.
the King of England, and
Austria.
Mm-hmm.
Here is a peculiar thing. Back in those days, all of these heads of these governments were connected by royalty, you know.
Yeah, they intermarried.
The
You know,
Kaiser, the German royalty, and the Russian royalty were very close, and some of them were English royalty and Austrian royalty. They all intermarried with each other. That used to be a kind of a deal, doing that away, in order for everybody to be friends and
as a matter of fact,
and kind of control things. See, you know.
I think the Tsar and the Kaiser were first cousins.
Yeah.
They were both grandsons of Victoria.
my granddad, my father's father, he was in one of the Kaiser's guards, the Kaiser Wilhelm.
Yeah.
When he got out, he brought his family to the United States. He had 6 boys because he wanted out of that.
You see, in Germany,
Yeah.
a long time before World War One, they had compulsory military training. Compulsory. I don't care what you done or what you did, whether you were well or whether you're sick. You had to take so much military training. Well, this Kaiser, you know, I've read about him. I read the history of it. He was for Germany. He done a wonderful thing for Germany. He educated everybody. Everybody was educated in first this and that and the other thing and everything. But what the German people didn't know, he was doing this with a little purpose he had back in his mind of conquering the world, just like Hitler did. Everybody, after they had served in the military service, they were trained rigidly in some particular branch of the army that provided to the army, see? And when he had all of this on paper in front of him in his office, and when he got ready to launch his trying to conquer the world, he could reach out here and get specialists in everything. The Germans were always great and good, and they were progressive people. I'll say that. But he had an evil thought. That's where a man.
He had a plan.
That's where the powers that be take innocent people into war. You see,
Yeah.
and he had a plan of conquering the world. That's
One of these boys was Herman's dad. That they brought over.
yeah, yeah.
Well, do you have any more questions?
Now,
Well, sir, we have a good interview.
Well, I can talk if somebody talks to me, but just to up and say something.
I think you did very well.
At my age, I forget sometimes the things. I forget to say anything or know what to say.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
All right.